I'm Renata from Be the Earth Foundation, calling from São Paulo, Brazil. And one of our main practices when we start a call or a session, a workshop, is just to do a 1-minute self-guided meditation. So we can all ground. I know we have like a list of 30 things to do, either today or until the end of the week, and the head is like all over the place. So the invitation is that we mute ourselves. You can get in a comfortable position, close your eyes if you want to, and then just take some deep breaths and ground and arrive. And in a minute, I'll call you back and we can start, okay? So enjoy. Just a brief intro to our host. Again, I'm Renata from Be the Earth Foundation, and Be the Earth is co-hosting this session of webinar with Regenerosity. They will share a bit about them in a minute. Ruth, who most or some of you already know, will be moderating the panels. We're gonna play a game, try to make this a bit more dynamic while we're doing peer-to-peer learning, while we're exchanging knowledge and reflection on trust-based philanthropy. And to close, we're gonna have feedbacks, insights, and a checkout. Okay? So I'll invite James to share a bit about Regenerosity.
Thanks so much, Renata. It's such a pleasure to be hosting another session with Be the Earth Foundation. Regenerosity is so proud and honored to be doing this together with Be the Earth Foundation and Renata and the whole team. So we're here today to talk about the light and dark of trust-based philanthropy. And this is one of the guiding calls of Regenerosity as a network. We are a collaboration between a number of different funding bodies, and we came together in 2019 with the knowledge that this next decade, the 2020s, are very core in meeting some of the biggest challenges of our time. So how can we as funders come together to help spread resource in ways that elevate and meet the needs of the world and her people in the time that we have? So we are a collaboration between the Buckminster Fuller Institute and the Lush Spring Prize, who I work with, and now welcoming into our network the winners of the UNDP Equator Prize, and partnering with other wonderful funders such as Be the Earth Foundation. And we have 3 guiding principles that we hold to our core. We operate in whole systems as much as we can, supporting our partners and their projects that combine the ecological, the social, and economic benefits in ways that create positive ripple effects across the world. Also, reciprocal resources. How do we transform financial capital, which as funders we are so privileged to have access to? How can we transform this financial capital into living capital that helps to, again, create those positive benefits and support nature's healing capacity? And developing development. How can we create space for authentic relationships that, like we're talking about today, are built on trust and built on real relationships? How do we help to unpick some of those power dynamics that we know exist between funders and grantees, and even maybe unpick some of that language as well too, instead towards sharing learning, sharing power, and developing in a way that is mutual and reciprocal. So that's Regenerosity, and you can find out more about us at regenerosity.world. And Renata, how about Be the Earth? Would you like to introduce Be the Earth Foundation?
Yes, sure. Thanks, James. Well, Be the Earth Foundation is based in the UK. It's a very young, small family foundation. that combines philanthropy and investments for a world that nurtures all beings. So we challenge the usual conventional ways of funding of philanthropy and investments that wants to make the most money or take the most information from the grantees, trying different models that we've been experimenting and piloting for these 2-3 years of existence. And we focus on creating collaboration and partnerships with people rather than transactional relationships. So I guess that's why we're here to share our experience with Instituto Chegados. Everything we do is based on relationship, trust, learning together, reviewing what we've done, and then redoing again in a upgraded way, hopefully. And we have a vision of a regenerative economic systems that prioritize life on Earth for all beings. So what are the economic models? What are the capitals that we can use to weaken the capitalism and strengthen local circular economies and things like that, alternative ways of relating and exchanging rather than only depending on financial resources. And we seek to offer that as well to our network, not only grants or investments, but also access to knowledge and skills and services and events and learning environments like this one. So that's us in a nutshell. You can also put our website there. It's betheearth.foundation. And yeah, I'll now pass it over to Ruth to introduce the rest of the crew.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ruth, Ruth Andrade. I'm also from Brazil, and Renata and I have been friends. Well, we knew each other since like from 10 years, and then we found, ourselves again connected. And like I'm connected to many people, I think part of my role in life is to network and be like a good mycelium, supporting, connection and flowing of, life towards regeneration. I also work for Lush Cosmetics, and one of the co-founders for Regenerosity. So today I'm going to moderate this panel discussion. And the reason why we're doing this webinar is because us and Be the Earth and many other of our partners, Guerrilla Foundation, who are also here, Calliopeia Foundation, Roddick Foundation, and many others are together into this shared learning and discovery around what is trust-based philanthropy and how can we continue to build the field for trust-based philanthropy. So this is the third webinar in our series around regenerative philanthropy and trust-based philanthropy. We're also really empowered by stories and storytelling. So we wanted to share a little bit more about some of the conversations we've been having about risk. We're all in love with trust-based philanthropy and we all want to move into this, but I think there are some blind spots. And I think the earlier we give light to these blind spots, the earlier we also create space for the conversations around risk and what may be barriers, then the easier it can be for everyone to move in that direction. And it's easier to make sure that, we're not leaving some important blind spots behind as more and more people join this new way of giving. It's not very new, it's just, new for some. Anyway, so today we wanted to go together into this inquiry about what can we learn about stories of great things, but also things that are perhaps not so great or haven't gone so well with trust-based philanthropy. How can we be super transparent and also coherent in our practices? How can we collectively minimize risks and build learning around these practices? As I said, so we remove friction or reduce friction from adopting trust-based models. And how can we actually learn from the people doing it, right? So today we have a lively panel, like always, with Romy from Guerrilla Foundation, Stefanos from FundAction. They're both involved in funding grassroots activism in Europe. Then we have Renata from Be the Earth, as we saw, and Tainara and Denner, also from Brazil, from Chegados Institute. And they've also been one of the fundees for Be the Earth, one of their trust-based programs. So I'm not going to go too much into detail. I'm going to let them, talk and share what they have to share. But first, I'm going to start with Guerrilla Foundation and FundAction. Romy, who currently lives in Berlin, she's the managing director of Guerrilla Foundation. She has a PhD in business society management from the Rotterdam School of Management. And she studied power dynamics and organizing processes and anti-corporate campaigns in the mining industry. So, that really great activism background. But she's also been developing online and offline educational programs, coaching young people, and she's a founding member of the LEAP project, which the LEAP collective, which also aims to continue pushing this idea for participatory grant making and trust-based grant making. And she helped set up FundAction. And Stephanus from FundAction is one of the many activists. He's going to tell us more about that. He's been working with emerging communities and social cooperatives for a long time, with a background combining psychology and public health, also experiencing humanitarian emergencies and community development program. And he brought all of those experiences with conflict, armed conflict, migration, in his commitment of supporting community-driven action. And yeah, he's one of the funders of FundAction, one of the activists from FundAction, and he can tell us more about it. So Romy and Stephanus, I'm gonna hand it over to you for you to share a little bit about Guerrilla Foundation and also FundAction from that context of trust-based philanthropy. And then I'll ask a few more questions about how your experience has been. So Romy, let's start with you, and then you, Stephanus.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Always weird to hear your own CV being introduced by other people, but I'm super happy to be here and glad to share. So yeah, I'm running the Guerrilla Foundation since we set it up in 2016. We're a small private foundation funding activists and social movements in Europe. And I mean, in the beginning, when we got started, I had zero experience in philanthropy. I had never worked for a foundation. I had been a grantee of some foundations, but like not extremely, because usually stuff that I was involved with was kind of volunteer based. And so I guess when we started, like we set it up in a way that we thought would make sense without knowing that this would be called trust-based philanthropy one day, or maybe it even was already at that time, but like we didn't know. So we kind of like, because we make grants that are relatively small, between 5,000 euros and 20,000 euros to grassroots collectives, very often unregistered groups. So like you need a lot of trust to be like the first funder of a group that has maybe just formed, that is maybe formed by relatively young activists, etc. So since we were wanting to do that, we were like, okay, like these guys, like they can't hand in extensive reports, et cetera, and they also don't want to fill in like, I don't know, 20 pages of application with like 15 spreadsheets attached to get 5,000 euros for a quick mobilization, right? So it was kind of like commonsensical designing of the processes, and then getting into the Edge Funders Alliance and other like funders, collectives and organizations, and being like, oh, there's a name for this and there's like a practice for this, and then kind of quickly got also involved in the setup of FundAction. And that was for the first time when I had this conversation with our funder to kind of really give away the power and kind of separate the money from the power to make the decision, and kind of for him to kind of trust other people with his wealth. And so that's when I really got involved in kind of like pushing for that like separation, kind of setting up FundAction as one example for how this could look, like really handing over decision-making power, and also the design already of how this organization looks, what the processes are to the activists that would in the end benefit also from the grants that were made. So kind of like it was a real journey into this. And like if I have to give a couple of examples, like how we live kind of like trust-based grant making, I mean, we do have calls with, I would say 90% of our grantees we know before they apply. So we do get emails, we get requests, we look at the organizations, if this is in any way a fit in terms of size, in terms of what they're working on, in terms of like the goals that they say they have, we do have a personal conversation with them, one of our team, and then determine like how much money do you need? Like what do you need it for? Like what would you have to say in the application for this to work out, etc. And then and then they are invited. So you already have a relationship when you invite them, and then that person that had this conversation is usually the advocate for that organization internally, because there's a reason why they invited them. So this also speaks to the high acceptance rates that we have. So if you're invited to apply with us, there's like an 85 to 90% chance that you actually get the money. Usually the couple of people we reject, it's like kind of then, yeah, like we realize that maybe they're not far enough yet. So sometimes we also give them a bit more time and then they come back. So we've done that a lot. So it's kind of like building that relationship, then inviting an application to see like written down, like, what do you really want to do? How can we support you, etc. And then giving out the money. It's less of like picking the best candidate or something. So you have that trust. And then when people then come back in half a year and they're like, hey, we have to change the plan and we have to actually spend the money for something else, we never say no to this, because it's like, who are we to know like what is the best way to spend that money? So the only thing we watch is this still within the charitable purposes that we are allowed to fund legally? So there's some constraints, but like, it's not us telling them, oh no, you can't do this because you said you're going to do this. I mean, what's the point of that? So this is a little bit the kind of approach that we've had until now. And what we're doing now this year, which is quite exciting and like makes me very happy, is that we're even further now splitting up the money from the decision making. So right now, until now, the funder has been present in meetings where we discussed grants, and this year we're going to change that. So we're going to open the foundation to other funders. So there's going to be a funder circle, which is going to give the money, which is going to be involved in strategic conversations. So there is a way for them to get engaged, but there is going to be an activist council of 10, 12, 15 activists from all over Europe that basically are going to make the grant decisions above 10,000 euros, and not the smaller ones, because these are supposed to be quick. So they stay within the team, but also not with the funders involved. So that's kind of like the journey that we're going on.
And Romy, I'll get back to you. So you tell me some of the barriers or the risks or the challenges that you had, but I'll go over to Stefanos, because I think FundAction has been doing that, you know, separating the money from the power and the decision-making power from the person distributing or giving the money. And I'd love to hear more about it.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's great to share with all of you this process, which I've been involved since 2018. And that was a very difficult period where we were running a project for migrants, unaccompanied migrants in Greece, and we were running out of money. So the whole welcoming of the community and the processes was something totally new experience, and how it has evolved from that point onwards brings an understanding that trust-based philanthropy and community feeling works and expands. So we have been basing our development as FundAction since 2019, I've been in, on certain values that have to do with democracy, inclusivity, openness, peer-to-peer working, transparency, trust, respect, and autonomy. Now, FundAction has more than 280 members. It keeps growing. It's also ability to raise funding and to create participatory processes for distributing this fund is growing. We have funded for the last 5 years more than 100 projects with more than 650,000 euros. And this is all happening through a platform where everybody who is a member is registering their projects, and there is voting from the community. There is selection processes that have to do with the criteria in place, and the projects that have the most support from the community are the ones who are awarded. There are, of course, a lot of advantages in this part, which is everybody is able to participate, everybody is able to vote. It is very flexible, it's easy to approach, and it's transparent, which creates, according to our recent evaluation, we had a very big evaluation recently, it creates a lot of pride and a lot of trust for everybody who's involved. It also creates a very strong network and a greater community where people and projects get to know each other and expand their impact. It also provide support on emergencies that organizations and individuals, activists have at a very, very quick response. Within a couple of weeks and even shorter, we're trying to make it. So on the tensions that appeared there, we can have a discussion later on. On what is the role of the fund as a community versus as a foundation, and like philanthropy versus activism, and then the ambition that is around there, and the capacity that actually has. There is a great effort for a lot of openness, but that also requires more advanced capacity, meaning more members to join in and more people to be involved in more processes. We are selecting the processes that are needed based on working groups. We are working with as many members as the community, and we are trying to make everything as participatory as possible, which on itself is also a challenge, because there are different priorities and approaches that people want to have in this. So in overall, my experience for the last years as part of this working group for fundraising, for community building, and also recently for the last 9 months as part of the facilitation group, is that the trust that this fund has created and the ability to distribute funds in a transparent way, and based also on the need of the activists and the communities they support, has been established, and it's clear that this is what enables it to grow and to keep growing, both in membership and the ability to distribute funding. Thank you.
Thank you. So folks, this is the problem when we get together to talk about the shadow side of trust-based philanthropy. We keep only talking about what's good because we believe in it so much. But I do have some questions for both of you, and I think I'll just name them, but I'll go to Renata and Chegados Institute, and then we can go back to them. I think one is, having a circle of 12 activists making decision-making. How long does it take? I'm very interested in the more participation you have, the slower processes tend to be. So I'd love to address that question when we all come together. And the other is, Romy, you also mentioned one thing that I hear a lot as being a barrier to trust-based philanthropy is the board. So even if your grant managers or the people that are involved in the organization are very forward-looking, you tend to have a board of trustees that can be more conservative. So I'd love to hear, how did you overcome, that challenge with your board? Yeah, but we'll circle back to those two questions when we come together. But just to give you time to think about the answer. And then I'd also love to create some space for Renata and the Chegados Institute. And yeah, as I said before, Romy, Renata, and I are part of a funders working group. And we have been discussing how do we move into the space from a very practical experience and really mapping the social technologies that are being used in philanthropy. And that's why, we're all together today. So Renata, you've introduced yourself. Maybe just to say that I know you're super passionate about nature and about collaboration. And I think you also come from a social work background and a community background and a community development background. So you have often had to look for funds, right? Not just distribute funds now. And then Chegados Institute, they come from a coastal town in Brazil, and it's Tainara Diaz and Denner Xavier. And they founded these hubs, this hub of dreams. It's a hub that, supports projects in their area through innovation, human and territorial development. And their main objective is to offer opportunities for individual and collective development of the neighborhood's children and young people. And their community called Villa Margarita in Mexico 70 is where they dream and work hard to, for it to become a tourist place where training for youth can help solve problems and turn them into global citizens. So Renata, maybe you can share a little bit the context of trust-based philanthropy from Be the Earth, and then how you have been, what's the program that you have been developing with Tainara and Dennet. And then I'd love to hear from Tainara and Dennet what's been like to receive this fund and to be in this kind of trust-based relations with a funder. Yeah, thank you.
I'll be very brief because I spoke a lot already, but just like Romy, I also come from a background of being an activist that needs to relate with funders and fundraise and apply for grants and this and that. And I used to do community work, so that brings a lot of intangible results, and it's really hard to put in numbers. So when I came to this position of being a funder, I had no idea how to do that. I just had my own experience and background and other people that I was exchanging. And also, like, I was so sure that it wasn't right to just require numbers and really long applications and reports and things like no one will read or no one wants to write. And it's like, why are we doing that? In the end of the day, it doesn't make sense to anyone. Are we just replicating what we are trying to change? And it's kind of a yes. And like Romy, we started experimenting, and then we came across all these circles of funders and other people practicing trust-based philanthropy. And we're like, okay, that exists. We're not that crazy. There are other crazy people doing that too. So maybe we should get alongside them and do it together. And then we can learn quicker and exchange mistakes and achievements so we can do things better. So in terms of this relationship with Chegados Institute, I've known Dennet and Tainara from other times of life when I used to work on the ground and train activists to do community development and mobilization and things like that. And I always loved their stories and their projects and their initiatives. And the truth is, as a very new foundation, everything we've been doing for the first time, we tend to do with people we know. So I guess that's also a shadow, because then we stayed in our own bubble, but we can address that more later. But that gives the space of making mistakes, experimenting, changing directions very quickly, because there is already an existing relationship. So we chose as a strategy, since we don't really know what we're doing, let's say academically speaking, to experiment with people we know and that we trust and we admire already. So when they open their mouth, you're gonna learn why we chose to do this experiment with them. And the idea is giving a grant that is unrestricted. They can use however they want. And also they manage the grant, and it evolved to being combined with a video so they can communicate better their initiative and also expand their own network. And also added up mentoring according to their needs. So we started like, okay, let's start this grant and see where it takes us. And it kind of evolved to a program that we're calling Blooming. That is this combination of unrestricted grant, video, and mentoring. And then next year, we see how this relationship evolves, because we're, as I said, we give one step, we analyze and give another step.
Thank you so much. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tainara. I'm learning to speak English, so then I speak more about our relationship with the Earth and with our projects in Brazil.
That's it. It's a big pleasure to be here again. It's hilarious for us. We are straight from the hood in Brazil. We come from the second most big favelas made of palafitas in Brazil. I don't know if you know what that means, but we live in an area with a lot of difficulties, as so many places around the world. And this idea, this initiative of trust-based philanthropy with Be the Earth, it's been something really interesting and new for us. new in a way, but somehow we feel that we have been doing this since the beginning, but without money, you know, we trust each other and share talents and, you know, time and other stuff. But with money, it is our first time. And in a way that we can be open and free to change the way of how we want to solve the problems in our community. Because as I told you before, we are living here deep inside the problem. So every day we get new ideas. We find out new ways of solving problems. So to have this open communication with Renata and Be the Earth, it is something really amazing for us. You know, the trust-based philanthropy, it is something that can faster and also at the same time can slow down, you know, the lights and the shadows. But with us, this first experience has been amazing. You know, it's our first time. We're so glad for that. I'm so nervous in this conversation, but during the way we can develop more the ideas. I spoke totally different previously, but I think that's it. First of all, talking about trust-based philanthropy, I think in the beginning of Chegados Institute, we started as a collective of friends who decided to trust in a way where we could get away of the criminality in our area. You know, so first of all, we needed to trust ourselves that it was possible to go beyond the limits that we have here in the favelas in Brazil. And then we started collaborating with people in this base of trust. We didn't know, we always thought that we should have money or have some power, you know, political power or something like that to do something in our community. And then we realized that everything is based on trust. If I trust you, if we trust in our idea and our feelings, we can change reality. So we started creating so many projects with zero money, and it was something that changed our life in some way. But after 2 years, we got sick because of this, you know, because we wanted to help the people, but in our home, in our space, we didn't have enough. So we got a little sick about that. And then it was the moment where I met Renata in 2018 in a global program for social entrepreneurs, Warriors Without Weapons, the name of the programs made by Elos Institute. And we had a great connection, Renata and I. And now we are here doing this project together. And the most interesting part, I think, it is this part of trust. And of course, there are a lot of fears on the way, and the possibility of sharing these, you know, to get a result together, to solve together, it is something that helped us a lot.
Okay, thank you. I'd love, Faith, can you bring everyone on the panel, Stephanos and Romy and me, and then I'll also ask a couple of questions because I captured a few things that were said, and I'd love to go on a conversation with you all. One is, Romy, we were talking about the board, right? Having a board where there is more conservative decision-making, or people that hold the money, they also want to be part of the decision-making. This is also an issue we have at Lush, right? Like the owner, he still wants to be part of making the decisions about where the funding goes. So yeah, how did you overcome that? Because I do think this is one barrier for trust-based philanthropy. How do we also create participation? And then I have more questions to ask, but yeah.
I mean, we don't have an official board because we're not a real foundation, so to say. We're a charitable company. So the owner is the funder who gives the money. But like the way I think we convinced him is like building up trust. I mean, as ironic as it sounds, but it was like just going for a couple of years, basically running with this advisory board where we have activists already on there, and showing him over time that the decisions that they take, and he was in the meetings, but he didn't really use his veto right? Like he gave his feedback, he gave his thoughts, but like he never vetoed anything. And so it was already in practice, the activists making the decision, but it wasn't official. So now after a couple of years of doing that, I guess the time was ripe to be like, okay, can we now institutionalize that? And like maybe now after 2 years of trying out this activist council that we're building right now, also legally transition the organization into something different that is not owned by one person, you know? So this would be my long-term plan. So I guess it's really like taking people on a journey. And I wish there was more talk about like educating boards of foundations and educating leadership, because that's the thing, like taking these people on that journey and then having them have the experience that this can actually work. And I guess also being a funder of FundAction in the last years has helped in that, you know? So this whole kind of like constantly talking about this and showing that how this works and why the decisions are better and like what you can learn from these relationships where you are perceived, yes, you're still the funder, but like people have a relationship where they can also share, we fucked up, like this didn't work, you know? So kind of like the richness that you get from that is much more than having full control, you know? So, and I think,
sorry, I'll circle back to that as well with some like concrete problems that we've had internally. And I'd also love to hear from you, but I just want to go to Stefanos and then for a little bit. To Stefanos and then Tainara, I have a question. Like, I'm part of many decision-making panels who has to decide who gets funds. And this is one of the most challenging parts about being a funder. And one concern that I have is that suddenly we're also putting activists into sometimes what can be an awkward situation, especially if we're talking about relationships of trust and you are in your community, then for example, or Stefano in a community of European activists, having to decide who gets money and, you know, if those people are your friends, and how does that work for both of you, to be in that space?
It is all about living our values. I can bring this experience from the facilitation group. We are not the ones who decide. Of course, it's the community, it's the entire membership who votes. And of course, there are dynamics. There are people with stronger networks and more frequent in succeeding. And there are inequalities in the sense that it's still based in English. We are creating a new platform now. We're hoping to have more languages. It's not perfect. But what we get as a feedback is that it is really good as it gets because of the complexity of the so many people involved, all the human nature and the competition that still exists for who gets, of course, the funding. And a sort of answer that would solve this problem, because we've really struggled with this, is that the more possibilities there are for people to participate, and there is the more ongoing support we can create, so the less competition there is for the funding, the stronger the community can get. And this is obvious because at the time we are able to distribute more grants that more or less match the applications. It's a great feeling for everybody.
Yeah, great. And I think also, like, at least this is the conversation we're having with Lush Germany as well, like putting money into FundAction, it's a very safe way to do participatory philanthropy where we reduce the risk for us. But again, it's what Romy is saying. Are we pushing, you know, also we pushing those difficult decisions to the activists, for example? And then I'd also love to hear from you, because if you are in a tight community, then you having to choose, you know, you have full freedom to choose what projects you're funding and who you're funding. Does that create any social issues for you in the community? Like, what is it like to suddenly be in this position where you can distribute funds and distribute projects, without, you know, fully based on the decision of your institute?
Okay, for us, of course, there is a challenge because we don't have a lot of experience with money. So first of all, we try to reinforce the trust that we have already created in our net. So we try to bring people to work in the process with us and earn money, people who had already participated with us when we had nothing, you know, so we try to do this. And one challenge is because the most part of the time, like we don't have our money enough to pay everybody, and we stay in this decision. So we have a big team of volunteers and some people we pay, but it is always difficult to, okay, I'm going to pay this guy, but this one also stayed with us for a long time doing for any money, and now what are we going to do? So yes, our strategy is this one. We try to be closer to people who had already participated and donate themselves to the projects already. So for example, we can give one example of the video. You know, we got money to create an institutional video, and it was open. We didn't know exactly the amount that we could pay for this process. So we asked for some, oh, can you help us? How much, more or less? And then we got some examples of other institutions. And with the price for us, because we are used to do things with nothing. So any amount of money, it is like a lot. So when we saw that, like the budget of other institutions, we thought, with this amount of money, we can do a great process. We can pay a good company to create like a very valuable product, but also we can include our net, you know, our people in the process of as well of creating this institutional video, and also learn creating an exchange between the company that we paid and our friends, if I can say like this. So with this money of the institutional video, we are creating one institutional video, a documentary, and a photo book, something like that. So that's it. We are always trying to involve, you know, the people who works with us.
Yeah, and I think like this idea of keeping the money in the community, right? You are keeping the abundance and the exchange and keeping money circulating in what was a gift economy already. Yeah. Yeah, Romy, there are some questions as well in the chat, but Renata, I have one last question for you, and then we'll move to breakouts and we'll come back for everyone to discuss. I also know that Ariane from Kindle Project is here. So the question I'll ask you, Ariane, if you want to answer in the chat, feel free, or we'll let you speak, which is, you mentioned numbers, you know, and the fact that funders are so into impact and getting numbers, and you know, even us, we are like, we know that funders want to hear this many dollars equates in this, you know, in this change, like this many dollars equates in this much land that was preserved. And we're like, no, like I refuse to talk like this, you know, like, okay, we'll get less money, but at least I'm not going to be talking those terms. When we're talking about regeneration, like how can you, you know, put a dollar sign on life? Like it's just the wrong way of thinking, but this is how the system works. So yeah, what are the pressures that you feel Guerrilla Foundation and Be the Earth and Kindle Project and all the other funders here in, yeah, around like, where are the concrete impact numbers from doing trust-based philanthropy?
Well, I would say we are in a very privileged position of being a small family foundation and part of the team and the board at the same time. So that makes it a bit easier to deal with. We already started a process of creating metrics like 5 times, and then we stepped back and we're like, oh no, that's not the way we want to go. So we're still developing. Also, it's almost like my partner likes saying, we live forward and we understand backwards. So we like to go through a process and then look back and try to find data. Of course, there are some simple ones that are very easy to get, like if you're talking about land conservation, or if you're working in a community, how many people live there, you know. So in those ways, it's like we try to find the numbers that are very low effort to find, that are like very obvious. We don't know. That's the real answer, because we're still developing. We're trying to find what's the good balance. My dream is like, if we could use like tears and hugs as metrics, we would be like 150% success. Like, you know, I love when people cry in the circles and they're sharing. I think that means so much about trust and relationship when someone put themselves in this vulnerable position. But I know that maybe for a charity commission or for another foundation that we want to inspire, maybe that's not enough. But I also think it's a bit of choice, right? If none of our team members relate to really complex numbers, and we do believe also like some things, if you try to make it become numbers, it just reduces so much the meaning of that action.
Yeah.
And we don't want to work like that, and it's fine. If someone wants to work like that, there will be people that can address that, and we can work with other people. And it's not amazing that we have so many social environmental issues, but there's challenges and change for everyone and every style.
And Regenerosity, we are, of course, like there are key metrics around, water or soil health or human health. But for me, it's just connecting that to a dollar amount, because there's so much complexity that needs to happen in a community for those impact to happen. How do we share that through storytelling in a way that doesn't dehumanize the project and doesn't, dehumanize people, but that can still tell a story? So yeah, that's the search where we are. And for me, this is also one of the barriers to trust-based philanthropies, the fear that we won't be able to measure impact. Stephanos, I don't know if you want to contribute, if anyone wants to contribute to this discussion, but then we'll go into our breakout groups, because I think lots of people want to say stuff. Yeah, warm data, exactly. Data and context.
Yeah, just building on top of Dennis and Tainara's story about the video, that's a great example. Like if we would predict that we're gonna use X amount of dollars to create a video, and that video became a video of an institutional presentation, the training of I don't know how many youth from their community, like how do we put that in numbers, And that's the magic of trust-based philanthropy.
Yeah.
We have the answer for this. I can share it with you. It's a lot of participatory processes, a good evaluation, being part of working groups, very frequent exchange, having telegrams and ongoing communications between members. All these are measurable. And it's really great to have these active ways of ongoing feeling how the community and the whole network works.
Yeah, very good. Like sensing, right? You're sensing. And that's also what we're trying to do as well, sensing through peer learning circles. And the peer learning circles is where the impact stories are emerging. And as long as we're harvesting that, then we can share and we can tell the story in a way that is showing impact, but in a more human way, in a more warm data way, connected to context and relationship. Okay, so now, we could talk for ages. I think I'm really.
Ruth, are you going to take
Ariane,
a question?
do you want to share?
Yeah.
Ariane also wants to share something. Go for it.
Oh, thanks, Ruth. Yeah, hi everybody. When I think about I'm spotlighted. I like that. When I think about the one of the barriers that we encounter at Kindle Project a lot, we don't encounter it internally. We encounter the critique externally around time. But it will take so much time, and we have to move money now. And what we heard from Romy, from Stephanos, from all of you actually, is that money still moves, like the money is still moving. So for me, the impact is also around how we share these stories and the time it takes to share the stories and the sort of finessing and which funders have the capacity to figure out how to share those stories. And at Kindle Project, for our flow funds, like for our programs, we also most of the time do not share the identities of our community-based decision makers out of protection for them so that they don't get solicited for money, right? Like, so there's a protection there. So how do you also tell that story, honoring those community members without revealing their identity, but not also wanting to tell a story for them? So we have found some ways to do that. That's the part that takes time. But I think for me, the impact is around, it's all the same, really. It's about relationships. And so once you're building those relationships, it's easier to tell the story. And the time taken to do a participatory model is, it already is within the outcome, like, and the money's moving anyway, like it's happening. So I don't know if I just wanted to share that piece about time. We encounter that a lot in participatory grant making of this urgency, this sense of urgency. That seems like it doesn't match with trust, which I don't really get. But yeah.
And I think it's the contrary, because I think with trust, you can move money so much quick. It's what Daniel was saying. Daniel, you were sharing before that when a new solution comes to a node problem, you can move the money to that without having to then write another application, fundraise again. Like, yeah.
Totally. I wanted to say that quickly. Like, I mean, we do the reflex grants, the smaller grants within the team, but they will be scouted by the activist council. So whatever they come with and they're like, hey, urgent action there, you got to fund that. We're just going to look at it and be like, okay, is this charitable? How can we get the money to these people? You know, like, what do we need from them to do it? So it's like, we trust them to bring us the right candidate, so to say, and then we take the decision officially, you know, but like, that's how this is going to work. And I think in terms of like impact, I mean, I do get this question a lot from the new funders that we're talking to right now. And it's like, how do you know that this is actually working? And I'm like, well, like so-and-so collaborated with so-and-so, they would have never met. Like, you know, like, how do you build that ecosystem? And like, what kind of feedback do you get? Like, do people share their fuck ups with you? That for me is one of the best measures of, is this really working? And do we have a relationship that we can grow with? And that they come with stuff that they learned that they didn't know a year before, where they're like, this is something we have to change in our movements, in our initiatives, you know, like, this is something you should write about. Like, we get lots of our ideas for our blog posts from our community. And then now we're increasingly also moving into them telling the stories. And again, like, paying people for their time to tell those stories, because it is important. And these narratives are actually really relevant. You know, like, in the beginning, we didn't want to have a Facebook page and no communications. And that very quickly changed, because like, this is one of the biggest things that you can do as like a small funder, to kind of like share this work, basically.
Folks, as I said, this is infinite discussion, and it's so amazing that we're all together as well, having this conversation. I almost feel like it's a living room that we are making it open, but it would be great to get more participation from the audience as well. So Renata, I'll pass it over to you. We're going to go into some breakout groups where we can continue this, you know, game, and then we will come back to wrap it up around risk. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, it's very exciting indeed. Well, we wanted to propose a little game. I played once and I thought it quite uncomfortable in some ways, but Ruth and I are going to show a little bit how that will work. As we know, if you're here, it means you're already familiar or interested in trust-based philanthropy. But we know it's not only perfection and the solution and the answer for everything. We know there are challenges and risks and things that you experiment and they go wrong. So we want to put you in small groups. We can do even 10 minutes, so we can have more time to share later, because I think everyone has a lot to talk about it. So you're going to be 5 people in a room. We want 2 people, 2 pairs, and 1 person that will take notes on the Jamboard that Faith will share with you on the chat. So the idea is that for 5 minutes, you're gonna give arguments for trust-based philanthropy, while the other pair will be giving arguments against trust-based philanthropy. And then you're gonna exchange. So you're gonna play both roles of defending or attacking, or I don't know, diminishing trust-based philanthropy. So Ruth, do you want to do a 1-minute simulation here? You can be.
Yes, because we played this game when we were preparing this.
Yeah.
So who am I for or against?
You can be against.
Okay.
Okay, so we get in the room and I'm like, okay, amazing. One reason I love trust-based philanthropy is that people have much less bureaucracy and they can have unrestricted grants and change the use of the money if they need to.
Yeah, but I think, for example, in our case, we have the charity commission, and there is, you know, what if the money that we give is used in a way that we don't know, maybe it's going to be used to commit a crime, or maybe that's going to be used to, you know, do, I don't know, like a violent form of activism, like that can really get us in trouble.
Well, but so that's why you need to pay attention to who you're choosing to be entitled to make that decision. And usually they're so passionate about what they do, the chance of that happening is so low.
Yeah, but then it means like we're always funding people that we're close to, because we have to fund people that we know really well. And that just this incestuous group of people that we're just, you know, funding the people really close to our network. Okay,
I hope you got the idea of the game. So once you get to your room, you decide who starts being for and who starts being against, and who is going to take notes. If you want to rotate, that's fine as well.
Hey, wow, I was writing while everyone was there, I was writing some of the issues that I thought that came. And I actually wanted to have more of an open discussion. We have about 10 minutes for this session. And then I have a question for you about, there's always this fear that money is going to be misused. Yeah, so if you are, like, for example, Be the Earth gave you unrestricted funds, so funds for you to use in any way you want. And then you're also distributing these funds in the communities for specific projects. You and Tainara, have you ever had any issues of money being misused, or, you know, how do you know that the money is flowing in the best possible way? Because this is a question that we're often asked about, you know, money used for things that were not what the money was intended for.
Okay, all right. We can come back in that example of the documentary. So we could take that amount of money and spend with a formal company outside of the hood. But our purpose here, it is like to increase the possibilities and develop this neighborhood. So work with people, develop people. So if we did that, we could have a good product, very good result, institutional video, but according to our process, that wouldn't be the best version, the best thing we could do. So we decided to, okay, pay money for a certain company outside of the community, a medium company, to have a good product. And the other part of the money we spent with 4 entrepreneurs from the hood. So now we know that we didn't waste money, because we used according to our purpose, that it is to develop the community, develop the talents, and also bring them for this networking. So yes, the connection, that's really important. So from now on, Be the Earth will know new entrepreneurs, and they can connect and can build something on trust as well. So if we did the opposite, it wouldn't be good for us. So, and yeah, then we have this idea as well, because it's hard for us to work with money. As I told you before, we started with 0 money. So when we get money, and with this openness, for sure you get like, I must do my best. It's even worse than if someone tell you, oh, you have to do this, that's road. This is simple. But if you want to, you know, to change, to bring new ideas, it is hard, but it is possible based on trust philanthropy. And this is something like,
what you're saying is that you feel more responsibility than if you had, you know, applied for a project with budget lines. Yeah.
Yes, it is a strange line. I feel more responsibility, but also at the same time, I feel more, how can I say this? I feel that I can do better. I don't know how to explain that. It was my mom, but that's it.
That's good. Thank you. And I have, Romy, I know you want to make a comment.
Sorry.
But, oh, sorry, go on.
Ruth, sorry. Yes, this idea that I would like to bring. And for us, it's difficult because it's not normal. We work with certain amount of money because we worked with 0. So when we have the opportunity of working with money, it's important that we have also the openness to make mistakes, because you never had the choice. And then when you get it, you must do the thing without experience. So based on trust, we can do that both ways. You know, we can be more responsible and, you know, make mistakes and learn to do our best during the way.
Perfect. Because that's the second question that I had. And maybe, Romy, I know you have your hand up, or if anyone wants to contribute to this, I know one of the devil's advocate, but this is a real concern. It's like, what if then the money doesn't achieve anything? What if, there is a mistake and that money, what? So I don't know who would like to say, yeah, Romy, if you want to say, yeah. Go for it. You can say, Romy.
I mean, for me, it's like, we have to stop thinking that we always have to be successful with everything, right? Why is it that businesses like entrepreneurs can fail all the time and you get more investment if you failed before, because this makes you a good entrepreneur because you learned your lesson? And in philanthropy, it's like everything has to be successful all the time. I don't get it. Like, it's such a big difference how we think about this. And like, if I get this question from a potential funder, I'm like, no, yes, they are allowed to fail. If we then can have a conversation, what does this mean? What did you learn? What is important in this for other people? We have a blog post about this. We have this blog post series called Go with the Flaw, because it's like, yeah, we have to talk about this shit so other people can learn. And it's literally, like I said, I put this in the chat, like in 6 years nearly of like kind of literally paying in advance, like really trusting people with money. We had once a situation where someone literally got an advance payment, never replied to any other emails, and never wrote anything for us, which they were supposed to do. And I'm like, okay, that person is not going to get any money from us anymore. And I sent them an email and I was like, hey, that's really against the values that you're stating and that, like what you're saying in your podcast or whatever, but it's okay, just know that you like took €1,000 away from other activists, it's okay. Like, I think other foundations with like more control have bigger losses. It doesn't prevent anything, and we're also not going after people with a lawyer for €1,000. It's like, it's okay.
We've had two situations as Lush, not as Regenerosity. We had three situations. But those situations happened with projects where we were getting receipts every month and it wasn't trust-based at all. It was all like really, receipts and invoices, and there was still misuse of money, but never when we had more trust. It's really weird. Yeah. It's a really interesting dynamics. Yeah. All right. Any more comments? Yeah, Stephanus, go for it.
I have a background in professional humanitarian organizations. I have worked to some of the bigger and leading organizations all over the planet. And I can personally tell you that the level of mishandling and waste of money is extreme, enormous, unthinkable. And I've been in responses in Palestine, in northern Sri Lanka, in Greece with the latest migration. The waste of billions is unspeakable of. So when we're talking about activists receiving not even a fraction of this funding and the impact they have, we can look around in every situation. I'll just name the migration, where activists have been housing, have been feeding, have been supporting basic needs and covering from official camps to unofficial settlements across borders and routes. If it wasn't for the activists and their tiny little bit of fraction of money, we will have seen, millions of more people dying around the world, which, bigger institutions with much more resources, they are unable to reach.
Yeah, that's very, I completely agree with that. I have another question that maybe Stephanus, I don't know if that is, that's very true as well, company bailouts. And then I also know there are, other funders as well here, but my question is about the legal barriers, both like when we were talking about flow funding, and I had that conversation with the Earth as well, like activists receiving money, and then there are, if they are not legally registered, that are tax issues. There is also issues about the charity commissions, if it's a charity that's distributing money. Has anyone here had any, solutions or thoughts about how to reduce the risk of the legal? Sorry, Renata, I checked the Jamboard and I'm harvesting the stuff from the Jamboard now. That's where these questions are coming from. Sorry. Just to say that the questions that I'm asking now, I just made a list of all the things that I captured on the Jamboard. I'll put it in the chat. So thank you for the people taking notes. But the legality of it. And Stephanus, if you want to reply, and anyone else that has something to say about this. Yeah.
Yes, briefly, I can say that we are doing, of course, background checks and network between members and the members of voting. So there is a cross-checking, reference checking of the work that is happening. And in terms of legality, we have been using proxy of fiscal sponsors, other groups that are registered, and they take the responsibility for the legal entities that they have and divert the money to the actual project and activities. So this is a solution we've been using quite frequently.
Great. Thank you so much, folks. We have to wrap it up now. I will.
There's one more. There's one more question from Renata.
Oh yeah, Renata, go for it. Yeah.
Sorry, it's not a question. It's just answering that. I would put that the legality is one of the big challenges as a funder, because as, for example, Chegados Institute is not a formalized organization, and it took us 10 months to get the money to them because there was no track record of international transfer into their bank account, and it's just such a hassle. Lucky we're so stubborn that we didn't give up. But I think for other funders that don't have this passion, it might be a block, because if it's so hard to get money to individuals or non-formalized collectives, that put off a lot of people from doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another one for our working group. You know, can we do something amongst funders to facilitate moving the money so other funders can be the fiscal sponsor, you know, so something like that in Brazil, for example. All right, folks, that was, again, a very, very interesting discussion. Faith, I'm gonna leave it to you to wrap this up with the invitations that you want to make for those that have stayed to the end. Thank you if you stayed to the end. And yeah, over to you, Faith. Thank you for, for the openness.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Stefanos, to Giaga's Institute, to Romy and Guerrilla Foundation, to Renata and Be the Earth, and to all of the other partners that are on the call. I think it's been really, really impactful. And we're still learning. All of us are still learning. So we're continuing to learn from each other and with each other. And I love the idea of this flow fund kind of continuing to flow out. I see people from A-Team and from other organizations, from Kindle, that are already doing some of this work. So it's really impactful. Just to note, I put a number of links into the chat here. So if you want to click on them before this call ends, everybody's link is in the chat. And then Regenerosity and Be the Earth, and Noah, who is also on this call, and Kamal and our team from Regenerosity will be hosting a Skoll ecosystem event on April 8th that we would love to invite you to. So please come to that. I'll also be reaching out via email. And yeah, please stay tuned. We do these on a monthly to bi-monthly basis, or every quarter, depending on how they're flowing. But yeah, thank you for your time. We really appreciate all of you, and stay tuned for what comes next. Here, let me put the link to Skoll in here. Excellent. Thank you all. You can come off mute and just say whatever you want to say. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Valeu, Denir, Tainara. Thank you, Romy and Stefan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bueno,
Bye-bye.
Good to meet you. Okay.